that because you would know better than me. So
I don't know about all that.
It's all those years
Yeah,
of
that's
wisdom.
It's like,
Very cool. So I just texted Clay, and let's
Okay.
see. Cool. All right. We should be live on Facebook and Twitch and
on the Twitches.
YouTube. Let me tell my mama to watch. Excuse me. Marky, can you let them know in the channel?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think Bailey said she usually has work meetings around this time.
She said that she texted me and said that she was gonna watch our whole video, and she was going to also hopefully, the meetings wouldn't be happening, she'll pop in and out and be watching. So yep. So she will do the work asynchronistically and take assignments and go for it. So I guess we're good. Well, we should wait. I haven't heard back from Clay, but I did send you the picture of Zen, right?
Yep.
Bryan? Okay.
Yep.
Cool. How was everyone's day the last 2 days? I was in New York yesterday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. How about you, Marky? How was your day? How was your day and Kat then?
Mine was pretty uneventful yesterday. For the most part. Yeah, just did a lot of reading and writing and more reading. So
For pleasure.
no, because you assigned me a book.
Oh, good. Do you love it?
I'm really enjoying it so far.
Tell us about it. Tell Bryan and Kat about it. I love it. So.
Let me pull up. Have it on my phone because I'm a filthy millennial and have ebooks on my phone.
Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Nothing.
Oh yeah, there's nothing. So the book itself is I'm literally flipping backwards to get the actual name because I'm like, it's too long for me to remember.
Yeah, it's a hard name. I forget it.
It is The Hidden Psychology of Social Networks, and it's by Joe Federer, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. And he is one of the minds behind Reddit as we know it today. And the entire book is subtitled as How Brands Create Authentic Engagement by Understanding What Motivates Us. And I think the funniest thing that happened to me is reading the first part, and it's broken into like 3 different parts in this book. And the first chapter is called What's in a Meme? And I was like, oh no, this is going to be a ride. I already know it. But I've got to, looking at where I was, I am sitting on, I also liked him talking about, getting sucked into World of Warcraft at one point.
Yeah. So, of course, when I read it, then the first thing I do is I get on Discord and I go, all right, everybody, let's try to do memes. like,
Right?
yeah, like-
I started reading those parts and I'm like, this makes total sense. Why does this make total sense?
yeah. So, you know, and this is what is a meme? What have you learned so far? Hi, Clay.
What's up? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Is there an echo? I can't get my headphones to work.
Nope.
Nope.
No.
No echo.
Oh, great. Beautiful.
Until I talk, of course. I'll just try to talk a little bit lower, so maybe it won't register.
All right, sounds good. Sorry about that. I couldn't find the StreamYard link, but I'm here. I'm ready to
You
go.
made it.
Made it. I was sitting in the other backstage area.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's a new link every time? That's my fault. I thought that it was
Mine was the old link.
Oh, good.
It was the old one. Maybe I went to the wrong one. I don't know. Anyway, I'm here.
So Marky, in 5 sentences, tell us what you've learned about memes. She's reading this really great book, Clay, and writing a report for everyone because we're going to meet the author. It's The Hidden Psychology of Social Networking, and he's one of the head honchos at Reddit. So Marky's reading it and gonna inspire all of us when she's finished.
I love the explanation of using memes incorrectly is basically the digital equivalent of quote, saying hello in a new language and accidentally calling someone's mother a ham planet. Yeah, that was the best analogy right there of the entire chapter on talking about how to use memes effectively. And how to avoid digital social faux pas.
Yep. So I figure if we have someone on Twitch and Reddit, and we have someone on Twitter, and we have someone on LinkedIn and Facebook, and we have someone on TikTok, and we start producing memes with the individual cultures, hopefully we'll start, catching on to something, and people will start finding value in what we're posting. And our TikTok guy, I think I told you this, we now have his apart from today, but yesterday and the day before, one was 7,000 plays and one before was 6,500 plays. So he's starting to build some momentum on TikTok, which is really exciting because hopefully that will, we'll be able to compound all of these different platforms together into a family of nerds and newbies. Marky, you're on. Why don't you tell us what you wrote and what your thought process is and how Clay and Bryan can help?
So what I did is I kind of combined both of your guys' advice from Tuesday. So Bryan spoke while you were gone, Clay, about how when writing, thinking about the artists a little bit to give them some freedom to let their own creativity out is great. But I also wanted to make sure that I still had descriptions and explanations of things along the way. I'm literally sitting here on the, I guess, technically last 3 pages that I'm still like messing with. But let me share this. Share screen. Share. Or no, that's not what I wanted to share. Hold on. You don't need to see all of my horrible, horrible Chrome tabs. And then make fun of me for all of my tabs. So I kind of started off with the beginning with, I didn't put on here. I had meant to and then didn't. Oops. So just having a caption that literally just says that we're in Santos, Brazil, because that will make it easier, but also including some dialogue that is there. so that we have that immediately established that where the action is happening is Santos, Brazil, right from the get-go. And then added having, this mother coming in and saying, like, we don't know how he did it. He just came home like this. Then coming into that interior of the apartment, Zen going, it's a pretty hefty gash for an accident. Care to share what happened, kiddo? And Zen looking up at this kid, and he's just kind of like, no, sir, I just got hurt outside and came home. Doing the same, like, look at this backpack and everything. And Zen is just like, well, luckily I'm good at cuts of unknown origins. Can you be brave for me while I do this? Like, kind of establishing that he may be a tough guy, but he's still personable. He can still, get on a kid's level and be friendly. Which is something that I didn't have in here before because I had this scene silent. So thank you, Clay, for your suggestion.
Right.
And then, having the cutaway to where you can see the whole room. You have Zen starting to talk and say, you're tough, kid. Try to stay, starting to say, like, try to, stay, like, away from messes and stuff to keep it clean. And that's when we hear the scream from outside, which I made sure to type out so we don't get any bathrooms from somewhere.
Very
Because
good. Very good.
I know Cat and Bailey enough that I feel like one of them, just to get at me, would do that. To pick on me. So went and kind of roughly described the two that are hauling this young girl down the stairs. As one guy having kind of a medium build. He's got long hair that's pulled back somehow, and the other is more athletic. He's got a beanie on, and both, like the girl herself, is are Brazilian natives. So putting in the sound effects of her screaming again as she's taken out there, and then continuing with that. Starting on page 3, I'm doing more of a freeform thing, like Bryan mentioned, where I have the dialogue and then I have the explanation of, like, what should be happening on this page. And so, just because I felt like that would give, with the fight scene and the chase and everything, it would give more of a freeform thing for Bryan to be able to use the space effectively for those situations, because I feel like my error with Cat and Bailey was trying to put it panel by panel by panel, and it really constrained them rather than letting them have it be more freeform, where you could kind of play with different layouts and play with different ways to feature all of the things. I made sure to put everyone's names also in here, and went and described the fight a little bit with some lines that are in there. Same thing with page 5, because that's kind of a continuation until we end up with Zen, who's sinking to the ground next to this car, or next to this van that he was chasing after he's been stabbed. And then we have Zuri coming in at this point, where she comes in, she kicks butt, shows all of the thugs that were trying to get rid of Zen and take this girl that, not today, basically lets the girl go. And Zen, while still bleeding out and trying to stay conscious, is like, who are you? Because he just doesn't get it. Like, he's careful. He doesn't get followed. He used to be part of a SEAL team. Like, being unnoticeable is usually the thing that he's good at. And so, like, she lets the girl go, kind of is like, hey, you got to put this on your wound. Don't, like, got to try to stay with me. Hold that there. And when he does pass out, she picks him up and carries him off. Page 8 is where I was just working. So explaining that he's now asleep in a tidy room in what appears to be back in the US somewhere, to make it kind of a point that he isn't where he was. So he's where like unimaginable circumstances have somehow happened and he's thousands of miles away from where he was. And starts questioning that, kind of checks himself out, like he was stabbed, like where's the wound, but it's not there. And then I'm kind of working my way through that, which is all going to change because I have more ideas. I just woke up late this morning, really late, and so I didn't get to finish it like I thought I would.
No, that's all good. Let me just ask you a question. So how do we know he's in the US?
That's my only thing is like I thought about like having something significant like outside a window in like that opening shot that would be like, this is obviously the US, like some type of landmark out there from like a major city. But that was just an idea I was tossing around and could easily just be like, he has no clue where he is right now.
Yeah, I mean, how important is it that it's the United States?
It's not.
Because that I think that's the kind of detail that if if it's important and you got to get it in a caption because you can't get it in any other way, if the artist can do some kind of landmark, that's great. But you also have to realize that takes up space on the page.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure what else you have in that space on that page. So it's really tough to give very specific feedback, without having the script in front of me. But just looking at what you're scrolling through, it looks like just formatting wise, I would just make sure you're calling out panel 1, panel 2. I can see here how you've got the dialogue highlighted, which makes it super clear and easy on the eyes. I just don't know if when you're most letterers are just going to copy and paste whatever's there. So I don't know if that highlighting formatting is going, like a lot of letterers don't want you to do a lot of formatting to the actual dialogue, because then that carries over when they cut and paste. It should, if they're working in Illustrator, I would imagine if they've got the font set or whatever, that will get dropped. But I'm just saying I've never seen a script that had the dialogue highlighted like that. So I think just as long as you separate it from the panel description, I would maybe all caps the character name, and then you would want to keep the actual dialogue in sentence case like you have it.
Okay. I can go through and correct that, because what I can do is have who is talking highlighted so it sticks out.
Sure.
And then leave that there.
Yeah, and maybe just leave possibly a little extra space then between the highlighting. If you're gonna highlight, who's speaking. There's a way to tab it without the highlighting, because I just know from experience and having done it myself, but then also working with other letterers and talking to other letterers, they just want to be able to quickly grab that and copy and paste it in, because their time is money.
That makes sense. I just figured that would be an easier way to tell, but now that you say that, totally makes sense.
Yeah, there's no real, I think I sent you before a template based on a Fred Van Lente script. It's not like screenwriting where there's one acceptable form for comics,
Right.
but you just have to kind of think about the requirements of, what the artist likes, how the artist likes to have things broken down so that they can quickly and easily understand information. And then how the letterer wants to see it. Now, eventually, if this were a lettering draft of your script, you would want to go through and number all of the dialogue and the captions, starting new on each page, starting with 1, going to, however many, usually somewhere around 12 captions or 12 things of dialogue per page. That's not like a hard and fast rule, but like a general good thing to keep in mind. So you might go from 1 to 12 on page 1, and then on page 2, it would start over again with 1.
Okay.
And that just helps the letterer know, and also the artist, if they're laying it out and they're thinking about balloon placement, how many balloons can I fit here? Well, I've got 3 balloons in this panel. It's just they can quickly see how many balloons are going to be on the page, and or captions. Same with the letterer. It's really all about making life easier for your collaborators.
Okay.
Theoretically, back in the old days, I've never with indie comics worked with anyone who worked like this, but one of my very first experiences with professional comics was in something called the Stan Hatton Project at NYU, which is something where they brought in some editors from Marvel who were editors of the X-Men, and they came in and they taught classes on comic book writing. And one of the things that they taught us was that it's the writer's job to take the actual physical art. So we would have to print up the art, and it would be the artist or the writer's job to do the balloon placements. So to then physically draw on the artwork where the balloons were supposed to go, and then you would number the balloons on your artwork, and then those would obviously correspond to the numbers on the script, and that's how you could tell whether or not the letters were going to fit on the page. Now, I've never had in working in indie comics, I've never had an experience like that where any letterer wanted me to do suggested placements, and tell them exactly where the letters were supposed to go. I know usually the letterers just sort of figure that out, but on the other hand, it can be helpful if you have a general idea, especially if it's like somewhat challenging, like a somewhat challenging number of words to get in there. It at least goes to show that you've been thinking about it. Now, you may not be a designer, you may not have a great idea of how those balloons should flow, and the letterer may completely reject that. But kind of along the lines, but you should be reading comics and starting to think about those things too. I think it's a great idea for writers to learn about lettering so they can understand that, the way the eye flows across a page. This is a great resource for that. I don't know if anybody can see that, but it's the Nate Pico's book, The Essential Guide to Comic Book Lettering.
That's a good one.
It's an awesome resource. Yeah, it's a really. And I'll hold it up again so you can see it. Yeah, right here. Good stuff. The Essential Guide to Lettering by Nate Picos. And so he goes through all of this, the way lettering flows, and I highly recommend that writers learn about lettering and how lettering works, because that will help you in your writing. It will help your letterer. It will help your artist. It will help everybody. So while I haven't had as a writer necessarily to physically mark up a printed out copy of the artwork with my suggested panel layout or balloon layouts, I have kind of when editing other people's work, I have kind of done that, myself on Photoshop or whatever, where I'll, say, well, how are you going to get this in? Or here's how you might be able to get it in. I've also had artists who in the layouts phase, they've gone through and done balloon placement to sort of, which I think is really smart, because now they're thinking about, because sometimes you get artists who don't think about that. They just think about the pretty pictures and how they're going to look. And then the letterer gets it and goes, well, the writer didn't think about how this stuff was supposed to go on the page. The artist didn't think about how this stuff was supposed to fit on the page. How the heck am I going to fit all this stuff on the page? And that becomes a real challenge. So when both the writer and the artist are thinking at every stage about how this stuff is going to lay out, it really helps everybody.
Okay.
Kat, do you have any questions about that?
No. In all of our drafts that me and Bailey were doing originally, I planned out like where the balloons went. I didn't like put them there usually, but it was like pretty obvious with like, oh, this area doesn't have a background drawn into it, or like it fades out for a reason.
Right.
So I can tell you on the artist side that, well, mostly because I'm doing it myself, I'm doing all of it myself, that I tend to very, 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 very roughly think about where the balloon placement might be. But I draw the entire panel because I know so many people will do that and they're like, this is where this word bubble is going to go. And then they won't draw the rest of that space, right? Because they're like, there's a word bubble going here. And so when that happens, and then the editor goes, yeah, that's not a good placement for that, and they move it, then there's a gap that has to go back to the artist that they got to fill in. So I tend to just, I think about it really lightly and go, okay, I know I need space that can be covered up because it's not that important, right? One thing that we teach artists is you can't have everything be awesome all the time. There's got to be some space where you can put the word balloons, right? And when they do that, you're not going, oh my goodness, they covered up my art, right? And so that's a big thing to consider. And the only time where I've actually had to actively considered the word balloons is when my writer was very wordy. And so it was just like, here's my soliloquy that's happening right now. And you're just like, so you want me to draw an eyeball and half a mouth because the rest of it's just going to be text, right? But that's generally the only time, because, you should be able to look at it and go, it said, hi, how are you doing? That's not going to be this huge word balloon. You're going to be like, all right, I'm going to leave some space here to where this isn't going to be as important. So if it gets covered up, fine. You can move it down here. If it gets covered up, fine. Right. So.
Yeah, I love that, because there have definitely been times when I've been lettering where, the artist definitely gave no consideration for where anything was supposed to fit. And they spent a lot of time drawing something that was supposed to be amazing, and you think, but this is the only place I can put this balloon, because anywhere else I'm covering up something really important. So I love that. And then like you do have to, as an artist, you do have to draw the panel as it's, like Bryan's saying, you got to draw it like it's supposed to be drawn. You can't, like I did have one artist one time who told me, well, why don't I'll give you the roughs and you letter over the roughs, and then I just won't draw anything where you're gonna put that word balloon. And and
you just can't.
You can't work that way.
I've done 5 I was putting together a source book for Awesome Con, which is next week. And it's for the 5 pages of introductory into the world of Ninja Empire, right? And the amount of times that I had to move my caption box or my word bubbles just because, and it was a flow, because a lot of people really tend to poo-poo on letters for some reason, but there's an art, and I mean, there's an absolute art to being a letterer. And if you don't know what you're doing, like me, right? Like I know how I visually see the word bubbles, right? And so I'm like, okay, this is flowing this way. I want you to flow that way. But I've seen people who can make magic out of word bubbles and not a lot of space and all the kinds of stuff like that. Right. But oh man, it pains me to say this because it makes me look like a complete amateur. I had a page, the first page is 5 panels, and it's just of the main character walking forward in a deserted, just area, because the next panel they get to the city. Right. And in those 5 panels, it says, what do you desire? And then he says vengeance. So every panel has one word. The amount of times that I've moved those word bubbles is unheard of. It makes no sense, because I'm like, this will be good here. Then I place the next one. I'm like, oh wait, nope, that's not going to work. We got to move this over here. Oh wait, the tail's not going to the to the mouth now that it's over here. Okay, we got to change this. We got to move that. And if you don't have that panel there, like if that panel doesn't exist, you can't do that.
Exactly.
And the whole idea is about flow, right? Like you want everything to flow, the words to flow, the word bubbles to flow, the art to flow, because we don't want to pull people out of the magic that we're creating. And if you can't do that, like, well, they didn't draw it, right? And like, they didn't draw it, so I guess it's that's where it's going. And then someone goes, but it doesn't make sense,
right?
So that's why I always tell my artists, because I've seen so many students try and get away with that, and they're just like, oh, well, this is where it's going to go, so I'm going to not do that. It's like, you cannot do that unless it's your own thing, right? Like if it's yours and you're independent and you want to not draw half the panel because you think that it's all going to go there, then fine, right? That's just adding extra time to you if it doesn't work. But if you're in a collaborative project and you have a deadline, nobody wants to send you stuff back, especially if it's gotten all the way to the letter. Like if it's all the way at the letterer, they're not going to send you anything.
Right.
They're just not, because it's got to get out the door. So,
and a lot of times these days, the editor, the letterer, is also doing production on the book. So like if you're working for Marvel or DC, you're just sending EPS files with no art behind it, and then they're slapping it all together in their production department. But a lot of times the letterer with indie comics is doing that as well. So that's like another thing the letterer now has to do, because now he's got to go in, he or she has to go in every single file and replace the art. And then if when they're getting the new art, if it doesn't match, now, something's off or whatever, now you got to make more tweaks. It's just like it's more work. So I'll always respect your collaborators' time.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And I think that a lot of people just don't see that, especially people from the outside or newcomers to the industry. They think that everything's very siloed, right? The writer writes and that's it, done. Right? And the artist gets his stuff or their stuff and they draw it and nobody sees anything about it. The inker does the same, and then it gets to the end and somehow the editor magically makes everything work. And that's just not the way it is, because you will ruin a relationship so fast if you don't think about them.
Yep.
I mean, and that's, anytime you have a penciler who's a lazy penciler, their inker will not want to work with them. And they will get a quick reputation of, well, they don't do any work. I got to come in and do all the inks. Like I'm doing all the fingers and the feet and, you know, the hair. They got a face. I'm kind of a body, and that's it. And then the rest of it's up to me. So I'm the artist, right? And then it's such a team sport.
Yep.
And people just don't get how it could be. And when you see the magic happen, right? When you have a team that came together and they're like, man, the inker is talking to the writer. They had a great idea and they slipped that in. And now the writer's talking over here to the colorist going, hey, don't do this like that. Remember, right? 20 pages later, it's very important that color was orange, not blue. I just want to remind you, you know, something like that. And there's just so much collaboration that can happen. And these books come out and they are just absolutely amazing. And that's, I think, what it's all about, to be honest.
Yeah, totally agree. So how do you feel about, so Marky was talking about that one panel where she decided, you know, she was going to kind of leave it up to you how to lay that out. Do you like, because I know every artist has, you know, a different way that they like to work. I know some artists want to keep it really loose. Other artists prefer getting, you know, no, I want you to lay everything out. And if I decide to do it differently, fine. But I want to know that you at least made the effort, you know, to try to think about how this is going to work. Like, how do you feel about it?
I, to be honest, I want freedom in some way. When somebody comes in and they've laid out every single thing, there's exactly, you know, 2 pieces of paper that are floating through the sky because that got let out of someone's notebook, and there's 1 bird that's over here in this corner, and then I'm like, I don't like doing assignments, right? Like don't give me an assignment. I don't give that to my students. Right. Yeah. They get projects that they have to do and figure out. And, you know, that's how they get to be creative, because otherwise you're doing it, not me.
Right.
Right. You can get the computer now. You can type in all that stuff and the computer will spit out an image for you.
We'll crank it out. Yeah.
And so it's like, well, if that's what you want, if you want someone to just then go to the computer and make the computer do it and you'll get exactly what you want. But the whole idea is you came to me because you like what I bring to the table.
Right.
And so if you take that away from me, you will instantly see, because it becomes robotic versus natural. You know, if you're going to go, hey, it's the city, it's New York, opening shot New York, and you walk away from that, then I get to figure out what's going to be the coolest shot of New York that I can put together. Right. But if you're like, nope, it's right here on this crack on 14th and 26th Street. Now I got to go and try and find that. Right. Like is Google Earth going to really, really help me find that crack that you were talking about? You know, and it's just like, that's so much extra work.
But if that's an important story point, right? If like that crack on 14th and whatever is gonna come back later, and it's super specific, and that's if it's a really an important story point, then the writer should provide you with that
absolutely
reference
absolutely
and let you know, hey, this is an important thing.
Absolutely. And when I was telling Marky before, I was like, look, you know, having something open where you're just like, this is kind of what's going on in this scene. You know, Spider-Man and the Green Goblin are having a fight throughout New York. Is that it? Like nothing, it doesn't really matter for the next 3 pages what happens?
Right.
Then just give me that, because then I'm going to have a blast trying to figure out how to destroy New York City with the Green Goblin and Spider-Man, right? But if within those 3 pages that you left very open, you say, there is one thing that has to happen, right? One of the pumpkin bombs has to be thrown at Mary Jane. Great. I know that this needs to be in here.
That's an important thing, right?
Right. That's perfectly fine, because then I also go, okay, so we're gonna have the Green Goblin throw it. Now we have to figure out how Spider-Man's gonna make sure that she doesn't blow up, right? And so I get to once again be creative, but there was something clearly that's gonna be important. Page 5, page 6, and that's why you told me, like, this is why this needs to be here. And that is, I 100% agree. That is, if you have something that's important, it needs to be there.
Right.
It needs to. Can't hear you.
You're muted, Nate.
Marky froze, so she's trying to get back on. My sound and everything cut out. Am I still there? My pictures.
You're good now.
You're good, man.
Marky?
Marky's not here. Not yet.
That's what. Yeah. Her sound and everything cut out. So she's asks if am I still there? My pic just froze. So she is coming back on.
Okay.
Okay, that was. I'm so glad we're recording this. I can show this over to everybody, and I can write a book and credit you both. The Clay and Bryan School of Comics. In the next hour, what do you think that we can get? Like Clay, you've now heard what she's written, and what maybe we can talk about. Now maybe Bryan or both of you can say, okay, now this is what I'm going to do, or these are clarifying questions that I have, or whatever it ends up to have you put pen to paper.
Go ahead. So I was just going to say, I will not, I generally do not touch an unfinished script.
Okay.
Because while Marky said, "Oh, I'm absolutely secure in page 1 and 2," she might get to page 9 and have to change page 1. Yep. And there's nothing worse than you designing that beautiful scene of New York City, and then it's like, "Oh, you know what? It'd be better if it was Chicago." So for me, I need the script to where it's like, this is done. Right? Like if you're changing dialogue that really doesn't have much to do with what I have to do, if it goes from 1 sentence to 20 sentences, then yeah, that's a problem. But if the dialogue changes throughout the time of drawing pages, that doesn't matter, right? But having something that we're going, this is what you're supposed to draw. That's generally when I start, because otherwise I've seen it happen so many times, 8 pages in, and then they're like, oh, we got to change page 2, 6, and 7. We're adding a panel. Like, where?
I was just editing a book like that, where the writer was sending pages before the script was finished to the artist to start drawing. And once you do that, you're locked in to what's been drawn. And so we got to a point where we had a set number of pages we had to hit. There was no going over the page count. And now suddenly, but now the script was going over.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, where can I cut? Well, you can't cut in the first 7 pages that have already been drawn.
Right.
You've got to find a way to cut here. So I had to go and actually take 2 pages and edit them down to 1 page to make it work.
Right.
And in that instance, I think we fell down the stairs and landed on our feet. But it's not, I was brought in late to the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I had been there from the beginning, I would have said, no, let's get the script done, right. Like first, like Bryan's saying, you've got to have the visuals locked. So that would have been my question for you. Like, how involved do you want me to be as the editor? Like, do you really want me to go through and like with a fine tooth comb, and edit it? Because if that's the case, I think I would need to get a copy sent to me when it's done, so that then I can read over it, leave feedback, leave comments, leave some questions, and then maybe we do a draft or 2, right, before it's set and locked and ready to go to the art stage.
Right. I know that I wasn't supposed to be on that, but if you want me to look at it as well, I will. Yeah. Because coming from a different mindset, right? I'm the artist. I don't have to think about everything else, right? I just got to draw it. So me looking at a script, I'll look at it with a different mindset.
Could we look at it now? And maybe Clay, you and Bryan, you could also talk about your thought process of like, oh, this is where my mind goes as an editor, or Bryan, this is where, this makes me think of this thing that I love to draw, or whatever. That might be really informative for us, instead of just getting notes back, to be like, oh, blah blah blah, this is why. So it might save you time, and it might be interesting for Marky, me, Kat, and Bailey, and anybody else.
So the I mean, while that it sounds like a great idea, what I've realized is that because the script's not done, right? It's not done on a first shot. If we just all of us, if we started coming in and like, all right, let's look at page 1, right? And page 1 is like, oh, it says this. We're like, okay, well, can we do that? Or can we do this? Or how about this? And then we start throwing in all these ideas. It might change, right? And so, and it's going to delay as you move forward. And it's normally best practice to go, here's my first draft. Here's what I'm thinking. And so then people can go, okay, well, is this because, and we get to see it finished, right? So I can see how page 1 interacts with page 10. How is this supposed to flow? Is it important that we get this establishing shot on page 1, panel 1? Or can this be a lot smaller? And then we can actually do some character development versus here's a huge establishing shot of New York City, right? Because we might not know if later on we're like, man, we really didn't get to know anything about these characters. It just, everything just kind of happened. But the first page is, you know, three-quarter page establishing shot of New York City. You know what I mean? So
I agree with that 100%, because it, like, especially just as a writer myself, like when I get too much input at an early stage, it gets very confusing, you know, right. About and then now suddenly you're trying to, as a writer, you're trying to fulfill all these random things that people have said that they wanted, and it doesn't necessarily serve the story. So I was working on something recently very much like that, where an artist was like, I want to have this, and I want to have that, and I want to draw this, and I want to draw that. And it's like, well, we've got this other requirement that says we got to do this thing. And it's like, and also I'm trying to tell a coherent story that has some heart to it. And, you know, of course, like we got to the end of the script and several drafts, and like nobody was happy with it. Because it was like, it was just trying to do way too much. And so for me, it's almost like writing. I don't even want to pitch you my ideas, man. Let me just write it, and let me write it well, and let me show you a finished thing that you can either say this works or this doesn't. You know what I mean? Like, you know, of course we can discuss general ideas or general things, but when you're talking about like really the specifics and the nitty gritty about the writing, just like, let me do my thing, and I'll show you what I got, and then we'll work out like, okay, how does this work? Does it not work? What does it need? A little more pepper, a little more salt, you know?
So I was under the impression that Marky was there. Marky, is that where you are, or where are you in the development of the script? You said that 1 and 2 are the only ones that are locked, or the last 2 pages, or where are you exactly? How far away from that?
I feel like I have, minus like going back and making sure I have like proper descriptions for everything. Like the settings are locked. The characters that are in each one are locked. It's just getting the fine tuning that needs to be done to it done. Because I have pretty much, otherwise everything else is set and ready to go.
So you're ready for an editing swipe now from
soon as I finish typing out the last little bit of page 10 that I'm staring at right now.
Okay. So what does that mean, Clay and Bryan?
Yeah, it's hard to tell, like how, you know, if settings and characters being locked, maybe one thing, but how, you know, specifically how you want the story to move, the story to flow.
That fine tuning. The thing that you say you need to work on.
Right. Yeah. like I would say it would need to be fine-tuned first. I mean, like for me too, like writing, there's usually I wouldn't even necessarily call them different drafts, but there's a vomiting draft where it's just like, I'm just trying to get this, written as fast as I can and get it done. And now it's done. And now I've got a big pile of vomit, and then it's like, okay, now I've got to try to go through one more time and like shape this into something. What's this thing I wrote, this last sentence that I wrote, that it's going to affect the first sentence that I wrote, and then you're going back and you're fine tuning all of that. And then like you're giving it one more read. Like it's usually about 3 passes before I would even call it a first draft, where you're then going back through it again one more time. What's not clear? What could be set up better? What could be like the emotional through line that like I'm not quite picking up on here, in this stage of the draft.
I totally see that. I as a first time writer, and Marky, this is her first time writing a comic, even though she's a huge comic book fan. There might be some blind spots about what you're talking about like the fine tuning that she might need to be like, oh, have you thought about this, that, and the other thing? So when she says locked, I think that is that what you mean, Marky? Is like you've gone through it, you've done your best at fine tuning it, and now you're ready for some
I mean, my fine tuning that I have left to do is that I need to go back through and just make sure that if there are things that I'm seeing in my head that are not on the page that are important, are on the page. That is literally the last thing that I have to do. And then it'll be set, ready to go, and be edited by whoever cares to take a look.
Okay. So cool. So we should wait till next week to do that?
From what everyone's saying, that sounds like the best option so that there isn't confusion going back and forth between anybody.
Okay, cool. Well, how about for some remaining time, maybe Bryan, you could show us what you've done, maybe for a couple minutes, about like you said you were going to try out the character,
right. And
Clay, I guess you don't have to be here for that if you don't want to be. Even though I'm going to learn a whole bunch, but I feel like this is the art portion. And I don't want to keep you if you don't need to.
I'm curious to see what he's come up with, but I might.
Fantastic.
I'm out here in a few minutes, but yeah, and I'm Marky. I'm really looking forward to reading the polished script and digging in.
All right, I will email it off to you as soon as I'm done.
Awesome, thanks.
Sweet.
So
okay.
I know that you guys sent it to me, right? But I had a commission on the other end that I needed to finish, so I haven't been able to tackle it. So
okay.
I want you to know that. It's like I haven't been able to tackle anything yet, but I have the images up and I can do stuff now.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's almost as valuable. So you can talk us through your thought, about what you like, what you don't like, and what you're going to make yours that you do, better than what you see or different than what you see with your experience.
Get this reference real quick. Okay. I like the alien. I like Verna a lot.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be honest. I like Verna a lot.
Well, so Verna is the race and Surly is the name.
Oh, okay.
So they're Vernons, and that comes from actually my great grandma. Her name was Verna Zahner.
Oh.
So there you go. You have Adam Zen, which comes from Zane, and then Vern.
Okay.
And then pretty much we'll crowdsource other names and stuff. But I thought that was, and Surly is actually my girlfriend's mother who passed in December. So.
All right. So I don't know if I share. Can I share my screen? Is that going to be allowed? Sharing screen. need these tips again. Hopefully, let's see which thing it's gonna. Okay, so we're gonna share this screen.
Okay.
I don't know. Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. All right. So generally, especially when I come into a project and there's something that's already there, right? Like what you guys have, you have some, and I know there was another like drawing of almost like a jarhead, like really Marines or Navy type guy was one of the drawings that you sent me, right?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I try and get the actual character description. Like, what is this character? Who are they? What do they do? How old are they? Like when I do character designs, I have a packet that I do, and it's like name, age, race, ethnicity, habits, education, family life, and it just peppers with a whole bunch of questions about who this character is, because it really helps when you're designing. You're like, would they really be like a swimmer's body if they're meant to hide everywhere and they like hiding and jumping through trees? Or, do they want to be this really burly person and stuff like that? So that's generally where I start. But we've got pretty much a seasoned sniper, I think was the last thing. Is that where we went? Was like he's going to be a sniper? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, he's a sniper and a medic from the Navy, but retired, and yeah. And I can give you the description that I gave to the artist. So
sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, normally I try and just trying to go, okay, well, what kind of body shape would we be looking at first, right? And it's very important to know the body shape, because it'll determine everything about the character. Because if you give them like a small head or a big head or an oval shape or anything like that, okay. Lasso, right? Then it just determines and changes everyone. And I'll show you in a second too, once we draw a little bit more, and generally when I start, it's a whole bunch of scribbles and basic shapes, right? And then I will come in afterwards and try and fine tune it, because right now you can look and be like, well, wait a minute, his chin's not angled enough as it is for as you have it in the drawing there, and so it's not angled enough, and you're like, all right, well, don't worry, we're really just scribbling it out right now. And that's one thing that most people never really want to do is actually do the construction work, right? They're just like, oh, I just want to draw, like I want to put this vest on and I want to put this on, and you're like, yeah, but what does he look like underneath it, right? It's important that we know that. And you can, once you start knowing the basic shapes of things, right? Like you can see I slapped on those legs, they're just cylinders, right? And it makes sense. You're like, all right, cool. And then you're just like, okay, we know that. We'll zoom back in so you guys can see it. Oops. And then throw in some more cylinders, right? So once you do this enough, right, you can actually kind of throw out some basic shapes relatively quickly. And then that way you're not bogged down. One of the big things that I've noticed about when it comes to character designs and young artists trying to actually draw is that everything's got to be done, right? That's all they focus on. They're like, oh, I got to make sure that it looks like it's finished. And it's like, well, but what if it's not? And what if your anatomy's off? What if everything's just wrong? And so I try and get people, it's like, this is where you should be having fun, right? And you're just like, okay, is that kind of where we want him to be? All right, let me, just for clarity's sake, there you go. So now you can really see it, right? And so you're like, all right, do we want him like this? Okay. And so what I would generally do at this point, I've got that body shape, and I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to shrink this one down. Right? So I'll put him over there. Right? So now we have that same body shape, right? But what we then do is throw him over there. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take just this area here, this lasso area, and then we are going to go to transform, and we're going to warp. Once we have it in the right area. Edit, transform, and then we go to warp, right? So for those of you who don't know what warp does, right, it pulls on certain pixels, right? So you can really push out body shapes if you wanted to. Now, granted, if you do it too much, if you do it too crazy, right, it'll just make the person look very, very odd. But, you can come in and try and make him taller, right? Push out his chest a little bit, right? And you're like, all right. Now, it might not look like much, but his whole chest is actually pushed out further, which means that you have to actually come in, erase out these arms, or move them. Well, let's move them, because for those of you who are probably watching, you're going, well, I don't want to keep redrawing everything, right? You're like, great, don't. Because the best part about digital is that you can actually come in, select things, move them so that they fit. Right? And you're like, oh, wow, his waist is really thin. That's because we haven't changed it, right? So now, see, like before, you probably didn't really see the difference, right? But now you can see that he's stockier, right? And so that means that there are adjustments that you have to make, right? You're like, all right, let's give him, still got to get him his hips, right? But now you can actually go, well, he's actually shorter if you wanted to, right? You can make him feel a little bit shorter, beef up those arms, right? But the main thing is knowing about your anatomy, to like, where does the arms fall and stuff like that, right? Shorten up his head because we don't want it that big, right? Trying to keep the same like length of proportion, but now you get to see it's like, oh, well, he's stockier, right? And so you've got two different ones, and that's where the description would come in, right? Like, oh, well, no, he's a really thin guy. Okay, well, if he's really thin, this might not be it, right? This is typical superhero type style, right? Proportions, kind of beefy, not too beefy, but lean, so they can go jumping around anywhere and stuff like that. So it really does depend on where you want to go with your character, okay? But then once you have it, I'm going to go with the superhero character, right? So I'm going to copy this one. Let's see if we're going to do a new one. Come back here, create that, right? And so now all you got to do, you place it back down, and you can just, right, because it was just a sketch, you can put it down, put it there, bam. It doesn't matter if it gets pixelated or not. Everything's good, right? And so now what I generally do at this point is I'll actually go back over and then put in the actual anatomy, right? Just to make sure that my proportions are working, the actual chest and muscles. And the reason for that is because if we were to leave it like this on this arm, right? And we're like, okay, that's cool. That's where I want that arm to be. And we're putting cloth over top of it, right? Then it's just kind of sticking to here, right? Put it a little bit darker so you probably can see it. There you go. Right? So it wraps around and it's like, okay, there's my stuff. right? But if you have muscles that come out, back in, elbow, this comes out, right? And so now you actually have some type of shape. You guys see that? Where there's some type of shape. So now when I come in, I can decide whether or not I want it to be super tight or not. But I have anchor points that I can actually connect stuff to. And be like, all right, that's wrong way. This is where my shirt will attach to, and it's going around certain areas, right? Like so. Okay. Whereas before, when we just had like, oh, that's where the arm is, cool. This is what we start looking at, right? Because that's visually what we see. And so as you can see here, right? And even if I put these lines in here as well, this one is still flat, right? Where this one has contours of the shoulder and the bicep and the tricep to go over. And that's what makes that different, right? That's why I'll go back in and do the anatomy, right? It doesn't have to be super tight, but you do need to make sure you're like, this is where that shoulder is going to be. This is where that arm is going to be. Because a lot of students will also just come in and just start drawing finished lines and like shoulder, that's where the arm is. And then something comes out of there. And then there's the rest of that arm, right? And so they're just making it up as they go instead of doing the underdrawing. And that's very important. The underdrawing is very, very important.
Do you have questions on that, Kat, at all?
Nope.
I'm totally fascinated. I had no idea that that's what you did. I had no idea. This is how little I know.
All right. So, but anyway, so I'm going to take this. I'm going to take this, and then still loosely, because this is not the final drawing, right? It's not at all. But like, all right, we're going to come in here. We already established that. We like that one. And there, and like I said, it's still loose, with an understanding that, oh wait, there's, there is other things that are going to happen here that will be tightened up later. And that's something that a lot of people don't get, is that, oh wait, I'm not actually done when I scribble here. I have to actually continue my work because you just can't be done yet. And a lot of people, as I mentioned before, so many people want to be done before they actually got started, right? They're like, I'm drawing finished stuff right away and stuff like that. And so I try and let my students know that it's almost like you have to know how to crawl before you can learn how to walk. But so many people want to just get to that finish line. And that's when stuff goes wrong, right? And we're like, oh, like I look at this now, see? I look at this, right? You see this, right? And while that arm and that shoulder is correct, it's not correct for this person, right? Like his shoulders and his biceps are far too big for what this character is supposed to be, right? So then it's like, all right, well, I see that now. So we're going to come in and we're going to shrink this down. Like, all right, let's tone all of this down, because there's absolutely no reason to have it that big, right? And I don't know about other people, but I know that I do this all the time, right? I'll come in and try this. I'm like, all right. And then realizing it's like, you know what? That hand's too big for where I have the legs, because if he opens his hands, right? So the regular proportion is if I'm standing up, relaxed with my hands out or my fingers down, that my fingers are going to hit mid-thigh, right? And if he opens his hand, his fingers are going to be down here, right? And that's that's too long. You've got like super long legs or super long arms, right? And so I'm looking at that going, it's probably the fact that that hand is way too big, right? And like, all right, just kind of quickly scribble in another hand. Like, all right, it's too big there, right? And the best part, especially if you're doing it digitally, right? Quick erases, done. Still in scribble format, not a problem, right? And so now you can always come back out and be like, okay, I like that a little. I like that better. Give him the actual chest that he was supposed to have. I'm like, all right, rib cage. And then we'll just say there's that. Do you guys know how? There's a very easy method to figure out where the latissimus dorsi, okay, we call them the lats, comes from. When drawing people, do you know? Do the artists out there? Do you know how you can quickly and easily find out where your latissimus dorsi is supposed to be? And it's important because everyone draws these 3/4 shots. I'm gonna assume that's a no. So the easiest way to figure that out is when you have this right here, this big muscle right here, your shoulder and neck muscle, right? Because it's supposed to be in a curve. If you actually curve it down, right, your back lines up. That latissimus dorsi will line up with how this part, right? Depending on if you're muscular or not, right? Because if you don't have these muscles that are bulging out of your body, then it's not going to look that way, right? But if you do have someone who is of a muscular proportion or anything like that, that's an easy way to figure that out. Okay, here, that might be a bit much. And once again, the beauty of working like this, right? You can still come in and change it if you need to, because all the rules of proportion and anatomy and stuff like that, they're not steadfast. They're suggestions. Well, there are some things that you're like, okay, if you break this, you got to make sure that we know that you did it on purpose. It's not just, oh, I just felt like it, or that's my style. Don't ever give that excuse to anybody. Why does his neck look broken? That's my style. No, it's not. You drew that wrong, right? So you want to make sure that you understand the anatomy and proportions before you start changing them, right? Because like I said, if you were to curve that down, it was a lot lower down. But if we want this, okay, let me show you how important that muscle is, right? So when I curved it down before, it was like down here, right? So when you see that guy, you think he's got a really strong back, right? Like it's very muscular. His lats are coming, or, they're starting from like down here. So he's got really strong back and lat muscles and stuff like that, right? But if you wanted him to be more of a swimmer, you put it up higher. You put it up higher, and he has more of a waist, right? So with more of a waist, he becomes a thinner person. So just moving that line from here to here creates a completely different person. And then, quickly. Throw out the legs. There's the kneecap. Here. I always tend to draw my legs too long because you may or may not notice, and this is for all the artists out there, is that you draw what you know the most, right? And what you know the most is you. And so if your anatomy and proportions are quote unquote off, like when people tell you like, oh my goodness, you have super long legs, right? If you were to draw people and you haven't, especially if you haven't drawn a lot of people, right? They're all going to have long legs because that's what you know. And that's why we definitely try and tell people that if you want to draw better, you have to draw everything, right? All types of body types. You have to be able to draw everything. And your default will still always be the person that you know the most, right? Which is going to be you. So just a little secret. I don't know, not really a secret, but it's something that a lot of people don't understand, and they compare that to their styles. Like, oh, that's just my style. It's like, no, that's just what you know. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just, you might as well just go ahead and admit it, that if you're stuck drawing the same person all the time, it's because you've only drawn the same person. That's it. Hands out here. Here. Okay. Out there. You. Head. Right. And now, and this part is when I start looking like, all right, we're going to have to start figuring out how we want him to look. Right. And now, let's build that up. You start looking at him, you're like, after me looking at the proportions over there, I'm going, he still might be a bit too big. Right? So, right, now he's a bit too long. It's the best, one of the best things about doing this digitally is that you have the ability to change it up so very quickly, right? And you're like, oh, he's too big, or I want him to be wider, right? See how instantly his body type changed just because I made him wider, but the proportions are right. So he just became a bigger person, right? And so like I said, you can make them smaller. What happens is they look a lot longer, right? Does anyone know why they look a lot longer? Anyone want to take a guess or crack at that?
Wouldn't it be that you are compressing the image?
No. Everything that happens when it comes to height and proportion is all based off of that. It's all based off of the head. Okay? Because we measure by head size. They're 8.5 heads tall. They're 10 heads tall, 6 heads tall, right? And so if your head is bigger, you become smaller, right? So if I was to take this head and made it bigger, right? Now all of a sudden he becomes a lot more childlike, right? Because he got a big head and small body, right? Now he's become a lot longer, right? We can make him even taller if we were to erase this and then come in and go, come on. What are we doing? Control E. Come on. Right. Right. And kind of fix his head just a little bit. Proportions look right. Yep.
We have a question from one of our artists that asks, do you have any good resources that you can recommend her for practicing anatomy drawing?
For practicing anatomy drawings, yes, go outside and draw people. I mean, it's going to be the best, actually. But if you're worried about like actual anatomy, then there's a book called Anatomy for Artists. It's a really good book. And then I also recommend this thing right here. All right, the Masters of Anatomy, Anatomy, Action, and Fighting Poses.
Nice.
Right? This book is like 670 pages. And what happens is they do this.
Hold on, let me make that bigger. Let me make you big. Solo layout. Okay, cool. Oh, wow.
All right. So these people who have worked on proportions and stuff like that, they're putting in all these poses, right? So you can draw this if you wanted to.
Sweet.
Right. This book is absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend it. These are, yes, this book. So if you're looking,
say the name again so I can put it in the chat.
It's Masters of Anatomy, and it's Anatomy, Action, and Fighting Poses. So, but the best thing, honestly, the best thing you can do is draw from life, because there's absolutely nothing better than you looking at a regular human being and going, oh, so that's how you look. That's how we draw that. Yep. Because I do know a lot of people want to kind of jump. What? We still have. They want to. Sorry. They want to jump right into, this is how, teach me how to draw. I want to be able to draw Spider-Man. It's like, all right, well, you gotta learn how to walk. You gotta learn how to crawl first, right? So, and that's why, and it's really funny because a lot of books and stuff will actually be like, oh, you need to draw this box. Draw this box first. You're like, oh, I don't want to draw a box, right? And boxes are boring, which is fair, right? Boxes are boring. Nobody really wants to draw any boxes. But the thing is that, if you were here at the very beginning, you saw that when I drew the leg, it was a cylinder, and that was it, right? So you're like, oh, well, I got to draw these cylinders first. Like, yeah, you got to draw the cylinders first to understand, right, how to do things. And so like that. So you got little hands. But as you can see, like, especially, like, I normally do all this traditionally, right? But always coming in and trying to fix the anatomy, trying to go, well, is that right? Is it not right? Because as you saw, I made his arm smaller, right? Because he was still a little bit too big. And then I was looking at that picture, and he doesn't really have these big traps. So it's like, all right, well, we need to tone that down a little bit. All right. So now I'm getting to a place where I'm like, all right, I'm starting to believe that this is his proportions, right? And I think that's what's important, is trying to actually figure out what your main character's proportions are. And if you're doing it for the first time, which is pretty much what I'm doing right now, right? Well, the second time, right? The first time was when I was thrown a prompt on a previous stream. But generally when you're doing this for the first time, you want to spend as much time as possible doing just this, right? Just coming in and going, I'm going to draw this. I'm going to see how it feels. Now I'm going to draw it in a different, different pose, different position real quick. Let me try and scribble this in. How does that feel? Do I like the way it's looking? It's like, all right, I'm going to come back to this guy. Probably have to shrink his legs a little bit just because he's coming in a little long here, right? Which is no problem. Just, right? Done. All right. Because remember, we're just, at this point, we're still just sketching, right? Which is one of the things that so many young artists want to not do. Just sketch it out. I'm like, all right. I'm looking at, and then going back to the reference, you're like, yeah. And of course, it's up to everyone's interpretation, right? Because I'm going to draw him and I'm going to go, okay, I think this is right. And it might go to the original creator and they're like, he seems like he's a bit long, right? Which might be a thing. And you're like, all right, he's a bit long. Fine, right? And then you can just come in and try and change up just some portions of it beforehand, right? And then digitally select, shrink up those legs just a little bit. Make sure all, once you change something, make sure the anatomy is still working. You're like, all right, there you go. Now he's not as long. Shortened up his torso, shortened up his legs. Great, done. So now you're here, right? And I generally come in and I'll draw some parts of the face, not much. Like, at this point, I generally make all my people angry, right? So they generally are scowling. They're like, they're unhappy. Nothing too serious, but something like that, right? And then I can come in and look and go, this needs to move down a little bit, right?
That looks like the Flash with the
I love it. I can see it, right? And so you're like, all right, cool. I look at that, I'm like, all right, I think we're ready. And so now I'll do another layer, drop this one down in opacity, right? Because it's not that important. And then we'll come in with another color. So it's always blue with me. It's always blue. It might be a darker blue, a lighter blue, but it's in the end, it's always blue. And so now I'm like, okay, we're looking on the reference shot stuff that we have here. And it's like, okay, how do I want to make sure you guys can see it? It's like, all right, so, and I'm still loosely scribbling, going, how do I want that to work? And I go, okay, so that'll come up here, kind of bow out there. Because right now it's all about trying to get it to fit, right? Like we want this character to still look like their character, right? I didn't create this character, you did. So I need to make sure that it looks like what you want it to look like, right? And so we're like, all right, so there's that. And then, just roughly trying to lay out some of the important parts, like this cuffed sleeve here, but the other one's not cuffed. So we'll probably come back in and be like, we might not cuff both of them. We might not cuff any of them. We're just like, okay, squared that out. There's the shirt. Comes in because he's wearing a bulletproof, flak jacket, I guess. Sort of flak jacket. We come in here, give him his belt. One here, one there. See what And then he's got this. Comes over here. We don't see the other side. So this is where I get to be creative, right? I'm like, I don't see the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and put some more packs there so that he's more versatile, right? I'm like, all right, there we go. So there's that. This is coming. It's not a vest. Is it a vest or just a shirt?
I don't know.
Because I'm like, is that okay? Because it seems like it has a collar. So I'm like, wait a minute, it has a collar. That's not a vest. I'm like, wait a minute, that's not a vest then. So this is where, if this was the only thing, you would definitely be contacting and be like, hey, is it supposed to be like a bulletproof vest, or is it supposed to be something different? Because what you don't want to do is keep designing something and then it not be what people want. That would be the worst. And in this case, because I'm looking at this character, right?
Yeah.
You'll see that here, there's the lapel, right? Thing that kind of flaps out. But then here, there's really no lapel.
What I gave the artist was, I'll tell you.
Okay.
Adam Zen, 40, is a wise ass and retired Navy SEAL who has spent his whole life running from his family's greedy oil empire. An American, muscular and fit, but not 25 anymore. The younger brother of Rolly, he heals like Wolverine and Deadpool. A little gray in his hair, scar on his eyebrow. He was a medic and a sniper in the SEALs. That's what I gave him.
Okay.
So wise ass, retired, little salt and pepper, muscular and fit, but not 25, and healer.
There. Okay. So I still see this as like a vest. Like it's meant to be almost like a flak vest, kind of. All right. So we're gonna kind of go from there, but we're gonna add all these extra things that are here, which are fun. All right, like this pocket there. And curve that way. And then this kind of goes over that pocket. That is odd. It's going to be an odd turn, but it's like, all right. And it kind of comes here, pops back out, right? And right now, all I'm really doing is trying to determine what the character is going to look like, right? With the clothes on, because what happens is we've got this. Oh no, I did it all in the same layer. Mistake number 1. Always make sure you're on the right layer. But at this stage, it's still digital. It's still early on, so drawing over it's not really going to be a problem. But we're really just trying to lay things out so that you can better see how your character is actually going to interact with all the pieces that apparently are going to be on the character, right? Because that's very important. Mostly because I'm looking at this going, okay, there's a lot of straps, right? How's that going to work when I turn it? And that, it's for a later date. When you think about it, you're like, all right, well, we're not drawing the turn yet. But it's like, oh, but you need to think about it, right? Is there something that's overlapping that now makes it so that you can't see other things, right? Because this strap here, right, had a connection point up here. But with the strap, that covers that so you don't see it, right? And so you need to know that, because you don't want to sit here trying to draw every single piece of the character if you're not going to see it anyway. Get the right color. I don't know why it's not. why it won't select the same color anymore. Okay. So we're going to have a different color for some reason, but that's okay. It's very, very odd, but sometimes the digital world will do things, and it's something that like I would have pressed or something, and then it's like, wait, where'd it go? How's that work? Why is this not doing this? And until you find it, you know, it's there. It's not going to tell you. Like the digital component is not going to be like, hey, this is where you messed up. I'm like, all right, fine. All right, so and we'll just keep moving on, right? Making sure we have some wrinkles. We have the arm. Lo and behold, he's got gloves, right? And kind of already put those in just with the construction of things. All right, so there's that. Got himself some fingerless gloves. All right, that's definitely too big. And this, it's like in this stage is really where you can figure out how to fix the anatomy, fix things that are there, and you're just like, all right, let's really hone in on what's going on. Okay, and then from his belt, there's apparently this, which I don't, that's